I have Josh Carter on the show from the Blue Innovation Fund, talking about their expertise and efforts in maritime innovation. Josh and I actually have some history together. I'm really glad to be able to do a show with him where he shares this and also his expertise. Hello, hello.
Hey,
Hey.
thanks for having me, Talk. It's
Of
great to
course.
see you. It's always
Good
good to
seeing
see you.
Yeah, good seeing you as well. Calling him from Portland, Oregon. We have Josh Carter, who is actually the fund manager over at Blue Ventures, right?
Maritime Blue is the organization.
Maritime Blue. Yes.
Yeah, and what's interesting is that Blue Ventures we found out was taken, so we actually have since renamed our fund the Blue Innovation Fund.
Blue Innovation Fund. And it's
Before we get started, Talk, can I just I want to tell a quick little story about how you and I met because
please do.
this is the best
I was
because
going to ask you.
you
Yes.
you and I are both veterans and I had when I was a founder, I wanted to go through this program called Patriot Boot Camp, which at the time I couldn't afford to go. And I don't know who connected us, but you and I connected, and you actually paid my way to go to the my first Patriot Boot Camp, which was in Madison. I want to say in 2015 or 2016. So it's been a few years. Yeah, yeah. And then I went back, and then we ended up going through Techstars with my company. And then after we closed my company, I ended up becoming the CEO, the interim CEO of Patriot Boot Camp. But and I've posted about this before, but there are people that have an impact on your entrepreneurial journey. You, above everybody else, has had the most impact on my entrepreneurial, like literally changed the trajectory in the best way possible of my entrepreneurial journey. So thank you.
Yeah, really. Thank you. Thank you. Actually, I totally forgot about it. And when we met during Christmas last year, you reminded me of it. And honestly, it really made my Christmas. It really made my holiday season. And it
And
kind
it
of
was the
reminded
first time we
me.
got together in person that we'd ever met
Yeah,
in
that's
person,
right.
which
And
was bananas.
it just reminds me, like, sometimes you do things and you have no expectation of things, right? And yeah, and actually I messaged Cohen afterwards. I tweeted Cohen, and I mentioned actually you. And just sometimes, it's I think that's the greatest thing about entrepreneurship is the impact that you make on other people. It's for me, it's not the exits, it's not anything else, but it's changing the lives of entrepreneurs and founders. I'm really, really happy that we got connected. So that's kind of a bit of our background, but you want to tell a little bit more about your fund and what you've been doing there?
Yeah. So Maritime Blue, let's start with that, is an organization, it's a nonprofit based in Washington State, sort of a spin-off of the Commerce Department, in that my boss was the maritime sector lead for the Department of Commerce. And there was this discussion about what kind of impact we could have as an organization in the maritime space to really impact and escalate and accelerate the maritime industry for the state of Washington. And the end result was this creation of a cluster organization. So we, as an organization, we do different things like joint innovation projects where we electrify the ferry fleet, or we put a private 5G enterprise grade network on top of port operations. We do workforce development, so taking underrepresented communities and putting them on vessels, not just in engineering space, but up on the bridge as well, and giving them a really top world class career path. We also do things like Quiet Sound, which is a program that um, helps mitigate the noise that the southern orca whales within the Puget Sound face when shipping traffic is going through. And so we have a voluntary program where those vessels slow down to mitigate the noise. And then my piece is I oversee all of our entrepreneurial programs. So we have four programs, two of them being incubators, sort of early stage. Let's get your idea off the ground and figure out if it has any legs. And then two accelerator programs. And one is an international program that is mainly for later stage international companies that see the US as a viable place to expand. And so we give them a program. It's a 12-week program, most of it being virtual, and then some of it being here in Seattle, Washington, where they connect with resources, potential partners with the Commerce Department to understand what that pathway looks like to expand in the US. And then our marquee program is the accelerator program. And we've been doing that for 3 years now. And we've worked with about 30-ish companies, a little over 30 companies. And during that time, they've collectively raised over 400 million in both dilutive and non-dilutive funding. They've created over 400 jobs in the ecosystem. So it's a very young program, but a program that we know is having tremendous success already. And so when we talked about how can we further that impact, what can we do to help founders not just give them resources and connect them with mentors and our ecosystem, but what else can we do? And that was ultimately the missing component was investing in the companies. And we knew that was the missing piece. As a nonprofit, it's a bit complicated because in the US, you can't just fund companies directly through a nonprofit. So we had to create a separate entity. And then we found a viable partner in Meliorate Partners, and they are co-GPs in this new Blue Innovation Fund. So it's about a $17.5 million fund. We've got about half of that already committed, and we're really accelerating that very quickly. I was just on a call earlier this morning with an LP as well. So I think what is interesting is, we've always known that our impact has been very profound. What we didn't really fully understand was how people saw us outside of our sphere. And so when we went to places like Norway and we went to France, and we've heard from folks all over the globe that stand up and say Maritime Blue is the example by which we judge all other maritime innovation programs. For us, that was a huge aha moment that we really needed to take advantage of our standing and our impact in the ecosystem. And the best way was building this fund.
That's absolutely fantastic. And then when do you hope to close?
We think it'll take the rest of 2023 to close the remainder of the 17.5, and that'll carry us for 4 cohorts. So we plan on using this fund to invest in as many companies as we can to go through. Usually we take between 8 and 10 companies. We think we'll be able to double that and in the next couple of years. And the goal is with the 4 years to invest in at least 56 companies.
You just started the international cohort, and we were talking about this, and you had some Finnish startups as well as some Korean startups. Yeah, tell me more. Do you hope to do kind of more of these kind of international cohorts? Because as a function of what you do and of I think the reputation, you're just seeing the impact of what you're doing, in international kind of places and international startups.
Yeah, what's interesting is the last couple of years we've seen a lot of inbound interest internationally. So we've had companies. Well, last year in our second wave company, I guess that would be 2 years now. We took a company from Montreal, Canada, and then in our last cohort we accepted a company from Singapore, and then this year we've gotten applications from all over the globe, but we really didn't have a deliberate place to put them. And so back in March of last year, we had a conversation with Port of Seattle Commissioner Sam Cho, and he was getting a lot of inbound interest from Kosame, which is a Korean business development group, about how could they get their companies into a program like ours. And so based on that and based on the interest that we were getting, we thought, well, let's create a new program for that. The companies are a little later stage, they're ready to expand, they have a lot of revenue, so they don't really fit the model of being in a traditional accelerator where in our accelerator, we have like maybe 2 people, and that's the founding team. In some cases, for these international companies, they have 100 people and they're making 10 million a year in revenue. So putting them in an accelerator just isn't the right spot. So we look at this more of a business development play, and it's actually for us as a nonprofit a revenue stream. We don't charge the companies, but we charge these economic development groups, and each company that goes through is charged a fee, and then we use that to curate curriculum to help give them a soft landing in Washington. And part of that, and also just in the U.S. in general, part of that is our event at South by Southwest this year, which we're really excited because that's going to give us an opportunity to introduce the maritime innovation space more broadly to a community that is really focused on the general startup ecosystem, and they don't know anything about the maritime innovation space. We all know maritime is not a nascent industry; it's been around for hundreds of years. But the innovation space is, and there are more VCs getting involved, there are more investors, more people disrupting the space. And I think the supply chain issues we had during the pandemic are really elevating that as well. And so we're going to take advantage of that whole momentum and build and curate a whole program at South by Southwest this year in Austin, where we rent out the Capital Factory, we showcase the companies, we have some panel discussions about what the investment landscape looks like for the maritime innovation space. We're talking about what programs exist for the maritime innovation space, and then and just celebrate these founders and what they're doing.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting, and it's a good model where you bring in kind of at least you can accommodate kind of later stage startups, right? And sometimes
Yeah,
they are not a fit for accelerators, but
right.
then they require different services, and that soft landing in the US, I think, is incredibly value add. Yeah, talk to me a little bit more. Also, like taking one step backwards on the back up on the maritime innovation space. You know, who are some of the other players in the space? How big is this market? What are some of the trends and some of the challenges that are going to come up in this space?
Sure. A lot of folks are focused on decarbonization, digitalization, efficiency, alternative fueling. We're seeing a lot of that. But it's a global network of programs. Even Techstars has a program around sustainability that touched the ocean, right, out there in Singapore. So, and then I think it's in Japan. Is it in Japan or Singapore? I'll find out. I think it's Singapore. But there's even one down in out in Norway called Catapult, and that's a really well run program. But Ross and that whole team run an amazing program. There's some programs down in Southern California, most notably probably Braid Theory. They're focused on the biological piece of it. So, what kind of, at a molecular level, what kind of innovation can be had in that space? Alternative seafoods, alternative kelp uses. We're seeing a lot of that. Sea Ahead in New England are really doing a lot of really cool things. Um, Even Alaska, Launch Alaska has a really good program as well. So it's a pretty mature group of folks that are doing this work. I would say more so overseas than the United States, far more mature. And I think because there's a lot of reasons. One is places like Singapore, they're very eager to adopt the next generation of technology, whatever that looks like. Same with Norway. Norway is leaps and bounds ahead of where we are. They're already using automated ships for shipping across the fjords to keep trucks off the road. That is already in play. There's somebody in an air-conditioned room controlling a ship that goes across the fjords. It's really remarkable. We are so far ahead in the United States for a few reasons. One, our ports are managed differently than airports. There's no like one overarching entity like the FAA that manages seaports. And so as a result, there are different structures. For example, in the Puget Sound, you have the Port of Seattle and the Port of Tacoma. Usually those would be competing entities, but they have the Northwest Seaport Alliance that manages both and oversee all of the business transactions for both so that they're no longer competing, but they're collaborating. That doesn't happen in places like, say, the Bay Area, where you have Oakland and San Francisco just across from each other. So it's really challenging. And then the other problem, or not really problem, but the other variable there are the unions. So we've had conversations with unions that are, look, we're not afraid of automation, but put a steering wheel on it, right? That's the kind of mindset you're dealing with. And so when you're talking about replacing trucks with automation, you're really chipping away at those union jobs, and that really hampers the ability to move forward on a lot of really key programs.
Interesting. And you talked to me when we were kind of together as well, and during the holiday season, that actually a big part of actually this program was actually the state of Washington really making a push, right? The mayor, I think, making a push. Can you talk a little bit about that as well?
Yeah, it's actually Governor Inslee really making a huge push. And back in 2019, they commissioned a report, and that's really the genesis by which Maritime Blue got started. And he said, "Look, by 2050, we want to make the maritime industry the best in the world." And I think Seattle and Washington in general are perfectly positioned. They're a port of entry for a lot of commerce that goes to the Midwest. They are not only a huge fishery and fishing industry, but its proximity to companies like Amazon and Microsoft really make it the perfect mix to drive innovation in the maritime space. And that's not the same for every place in the US. I think the Bay Area, where I grew up, they're amazing, and they, of course, are the epicenter for a lot of innovation, but it doesn't feel as organized as Washington State. Same with on the East Coast. There's a lot of really new things being formed that Maritime Blue is being used as sort of the example, as a cluster. They're seeing how much organization and efficiency we're creating by being a cluster organization, and now we're seeing the New England area really come around and coalesce around that idea.
And then kind of want to talk to you about kind of your experience. You are not a fund manager. That is not your background. If you had some advice for people that actually are, starting a fund, what would that be?
Oh my God. So I have a small fund called 1859 Ventures in Oregon. And I think what I underestimated was how many conversations you have to fundraise as a fund manager versus an entrepreneur. And the reason is because when you're an entrepreneur, it's really easy to identify which investors really fit your model and what you're doing. On the investment side, it's really difficult to identify individuals. It's really difficult to identify what funds will invest in you. And as a first-time manager, you're not a known entity, so it's really challenging. So I would say if you think it's going to take 6 months, double that or even triple that. It's going to take a lot. And as a founder, if you thought 100 conversations was going to get you 100,000, double that as a fund manager, right? And so I guess looking back, I think the biggest takeaway was I found a great mentor. His name's Yohei. He used to be the director of pipeline at Techstars. And he takes a very different, pragmatic, very mathematical approach when he's fundraising. He has a sheet, and it's like it's almost like a sales funnel. If I reach out to 100 potential LPs and that results in $1 million, and I want to close 5 million, well then guess what? I have to times 5 the outreach I do at the top of my funnel. And that was really interesting. And he's very thoughtful in how he does that. So I would say for first time fund managers, find a mentor, somebody that you look up to help you understand what it is that you're getting yourself into. And then also the difference between being an entrepreneur and a fund manager is the life cycle is variable, right? You can say, I'm going to be a founder of this company, and if I get an exit in 5 years, great. If I get bought out 2 years, great. If I go IPO in 10, great. But it's a bit variable. With funds, expect to be doing this for the next 10 to 15, 20 years, because each of these funds have a life cycle, right? And so you're married to this, literally. And so it is starkly different from going from the entrepreneurial world to the VC world. It is hugely different.
And what I've actually found is that some founders are actually not the right time in their life, not yet prepared to actually make that shift, to be married to the fund, right? They think it is, they can exit and kind of leave quickly, but LPs don't have that expectation, right?
Yeah, and if that's the case, if you're going into it from the entrepreneurial perspective and you're looking at wanting to create a fund, maybe the right angle is go be an angel for a bit, go be an LP in a fund for a bit, and see what that looks like. And that at least dips your toe in the water to see what that whole world feels like. And then if you actually want to create a fund, great, you have that background. But going from entrepreneur to straight GP can be a rocky road.
Really good insight. The expectations of timelines are very, very different. Well, on that note, thank you for your time. Best of luck on this particular cohort, and see you at South by Southwest.
Yes, sir. Thank you.